What if I told you that everything you believed in, looking at the majestic pyramids and golden mass, hides the main secret of this civilization from you? We are used to seeing ancient Egypt as a country of priests, builders, and endless religious rituals frozen in stone. But behind this ceremonial facade lay one of the most efficient, ruthless, and pragmatic military machines in human history. The Egyptians did not just build tombs, they survived in conditions where nature itself tried to destroy them every day. Their true strength lay not in prayers to the gods, but in their ability to turn the scorching desert. This is not a story of beautiful myths, but of harsh reality, where water was more precious than gold, and knowledge of logistics saved more lives than the sharpest swords. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how one simple engineering trick allowed Egyptian fortresses to remain impregnable for centuries.
The chariots will circle wide and hit their flank here.
What if they hold the ridge?
Want to know a secret that will change your perception of warfare in ancient times? We often imagine battles of the past as heroic face-to-face combat, where everything is decided by the personal valor of the warrior. However, Egyptian generals understood that real wars were won long before armies saw each other on the horizon. The main enemy for any army on the march was not the man with the spear, but the merciless sun and the lack of moisture. Victory went to those who could lead thousands of people through the lifeless sands while maintaining their combat effectiveness. The Egyptian army was first and foremost a marvel of organization and planning, not just a collection of armed men. Each campaign began with careful calculations made by scribes.
The supply lines here are too exposed.
We risk ambush.
They knew exactly how much grain, water, and sandals each soldier would need for a certain number of days of travel.
Rations are critical.
A mistake in the calculations for just one day could lead to the death of an entire detachment without a single shot being fired. It was the mathematics of survival, where the numbers on the papyrus had the weight of human life.
Move aside.
Water was the heaviest and most essential cargo on any expedition through the desert. Soldiers carried water supplies and leather wineskins, but this was only enough for short journeys between sources. Therefore, the army's route was always laid out strictly from one well to another.
The spring is that way. Take your men and secure it.
If reconnaissance
Move out.
reported that a well had dried up or was poisoned, the army changed its route or turned back.
The well is
The
dry.
risk of running out of
There's
water
barely
in the
enough
desert
left in
was
the skins
considered
for the
unacceptable.
officers. The men are starting to panic.
The Egyptians used huge caravans of donkeys to transport supplies, as camels did not appear in the army until much later. These hardy animals carried sacks of grain, tents, and weapons. Managing such a caravan required special skills to prevent the animals from collapsing from exhaustion. The drivers monitored the condition of the cargo and distributed it in such a way as to maintain the speed of the column. Without this living logistics, the army would not have been able to move away from the Nile for even a couple of days. Interestingly, each soldier was also required to carry his own minimum supply of provisions. This included a bag of crackers or grain, which was supposed to be enough in case the supply train fell behind. This autonomy allowed the advance units to act quickly and independently of the main body of troops. The Egyptian knew that his life was in his own supply bag. Discipline in the matter of preserving personal rations was ironclad and controlled by the commanders of the tens. Survival was not a matter of luck, but the result of the hard work of thousands of people. We would be very interested to hear your opinion. What do you think about the fact that the main weapons of antiquity were not steel, but water and mathematics? Write about it in the comments.
Hold the line. For Egypt!
Are you ready for the shocking truth about how one technology completely rewrote the rules of war? For a long time, the Egyptians fought on foot, relying on shields and spears. This encounter was a painful lesson for them, but one they learned with incredible speed and efficiency. Egyptian engineers didn't just copy someone else's technology, they perfected it, creating a machine that was unparalleled. The Egyptian war chariot was the pinnacle of engineering at the time, the Ferrari of the ancient world. Unlike the heavy and unwieldy chariots of their neighbors, The Egyptian design was surprisingly light and maneuverable. The craftsmen used different types of wood, gluing them together and bending them under steam to achieve maximum strength with minimum weight. The entire structure weighed so little that two people could easily lift it and carry it over an obstacle. This gave a huge advantage on the battlefield, allowing the direction of attack to be changed instantly. The wheels were a true masterpiece. They had spokes which made them elastic and resistant to impacts from stones. The wide axle ensured stability on sharp turns, preventing the chariot from overturning. The platform for the crew was woven from leather straps which provided shock absorption when driving over uneven surfaces. This allowed the archer to shoot accurately even at full speed without losing balance. The crew consisted of two people, a charioteer who drove the horses and a fighter, usually an archer or spearman. The charioteer was not just a driver, but a high-class professional who knew how to feel the rhythm of battle. He had to maneuver so that the archer always had a comfortable firing range and was protected from the enemy. The coordination of this pair was achieved through years of grueling training on the training grounds. They acted as a single organism, where one controlled the movement. Thus, the introduction of chariots completely changed the strategy of the Egyptian army and expanded the borders of the empire. The Egyptians proved that they could not only adopt foreign ideas, but also do so better than the original. This technology became the key to their dominance in the region for centuries to come. Do you think the chariot can be called the most important invention in the history of military technology before the advent of gunpowder? I discovered this by chance while examining ancient bas-reliefs, a weapon that resembles neither a sword nor an axe, but combines the power of both. I am talking about the Khopesh, a legendary curved blade that became a symbol of Egyptian military power. This weapon looks strange and even frightening to the untrained eye, resembling the leg of a large animal or a sickle. But behind this unusual shape lay ingenious engineering. The Khopesh was made of bronze, as iron was a rare and expensive metal at that time. Bronze was ideal for casting, allowing complex curved shapes to be created in a single piece. The blade was sharpened on the outside of the curve, making it a cutting weapon of formidable power. Unlike straight swords, the Khopesh concentrated all the force of the blow on a small area of the blade. One successful swing could easily cut through leather armor or split a wooden shield. The unique shape of the blade allowed not only for cutting, but also for performing complex tactical maneuvers. With a sharp jerk toward himself, the Egyptian warrior opened the enemy up for a deadly blow with a spear or a second blade. This technique was especially effective against peoples accustomed to hiding behind a solid wall of shields. The Khopesh turned the enemy's defense into its vulnerability. In addition, the hook of the Khopesh could be used to trip the enemy or wrestle weapons from their hands. In close combat, where fractions of a second decided everything, such versatility gave a huge advantage. Egyptian warriors could improvise, changing their fighting style from rough chopping to cunning grabs. This required serious physical training and long-term weapon training. The Khopesh was a tool for professionals, not militiamen. Interestingly, the Khopesh evolved from an agricultural sickle and axe, combining their best qualities. The Egyptians, being a nation of farmers, transferred the form of a peaceful tool to the battlefield. The symbolism of reaping enemies was clear to every soldier of that time. Pharaohs were often depicted with a Khopesh in their hands, raising it above the heads of their defeated enemies. This emphasized the weapon's status as an instrument of divine power. Are you ready to learn the truth about why Egyptian fortresses were considered impregnable, even though they were built from ordinary mud? We are used to thinking that a reliable castle must be built from huge stone blocks. But in the desert, where stone was scarce, Egyptian engineers found a solution that proved to be just as effective. They used what was available in unlimited quantities right under their feet: Nile silt and clay. Egyptian fortresses, such as the famous citadel in Buchan, were masterpieces of fortification art. The walls were built of sun-dried bricks, not fired in a kiln. It would seem that such material should be fragile, but in a dry climate it became as hard as stone. Moreover, brickwork had the property of absorbing the impact of battering rams, while hard stone could crack. The walls were several meters thick, making them virtually invulnerable to the weapons of the time. Architects designed complex defense systems that included several lines of defense. A deep moat was often dug in front of the main wall, the slopes of which were lined with slippery gypsum. An enemy who descended into such a moat could not get back out and became an easy target for archers on the walls. It was a simple but deadly trap that broke any attack. Crossing the moat became a suicidal mission for the attackers. The walls of the fortress were reinforced with protruding towers and bastions that allowed for crossfire. This meant that any unit that approached the wall came under fire not only from the front. The Egyptians calculated the angles of fire with mathematical precision, leaving no blind spots around the citadel. Archers on the towers could shoot comfortably while remaining completely safe behind the battlements. Studying the plans of these fortresses, modern military experts find principles that are still used today. Sectoral fire, echelon defense, control of entrances. All this was invented thousands of years ago. Egyptian fortification was dictated by the logic of war, which has changed little over the millennia. Are you ready to find out what the builders and defenders of these walls ate in the next chapter?
This entry is incorrect. We are missing 200 rations of bread.
No army in the world can fight on an empty stomach, and the Egyptians knew this better than anyone. Supplying troops with food was a task of national importance. The Egyptian soldiers' diet was based on simple but high-calorie foods that did not spoil quickly in the heat. Bread was the staple food. It was baked in huge quantities in different varieties and shapes. It was a source of energy available to everyone. The second most important element of nutrition was beer, but not as we know it today. Ancient Egyptian beer was a thick, nutritious drink, more like liquid porridge.
We earned it today.
It contained little alcohol but was rich in vitamins and calories, which were necessary for hard physical labor. In addition, many bacteria were killed during the fermentation process, making beer safer than water from questionable sources. Vegetables such as onions and garlic had a special place in the soldiers' diet. The Egyptians believed that these foods gave strength and protected against disease, and modern science confirms that they were right. Onions and garlic have antibacterial properties, which was critically important in the crowded and unsanitary conditions of the camps. They were easy to transport and retain their properties for a long time in a dry climate. Bunches of onions were a constant feature of any military supply train. Meat was not part of the daily diet of an ordinary soldier, but it was an important part of the diet before battles or holidays. Usually dried or cured meat was used, which could be stored for months without refrigeration. Fish from the Nile was also an affordable source of protein. It was salted and dried on an industrial scale. A balanced diet allowed soldiers to maintain muscle mass and endurance. Cooking on the march was organized centrally to avoid chaos and theft of food.
2 loaves per man.
Special teams of cooks and bakers followed the army, setting up field kitchens at campsites. Food was distributed strictly according to lists, and officers ensured that everyone received their portion. A hungry soldier was considered a useless soldier. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how the Egyptians moved huge armies faster than anyone else in the ancient world? While other peoples spent weeks making their way through forests and mountains, the Egyptians used a natural conveyor belt. The river was not just a source of water, but a major transport artery that allowed troops to be moved from south to north in a matter of days. This gave the Pharaohs a strategic mobility that their enemies did not have. The Egyptian navy consisted of hundreds of ships for various purposes, from cargo barges to fast warships. Shipbuilding was highly developed, and craftsmen were able to build ships without a single nail, tying the planks together with ropes. This made the ships flexible and resistant to impacts from shoals and waves. Special transport ships could carry not only soldiers, but also chariots, horses, and siege weapons.
Move the horses forward.
Loading and
Next
unloading were
chariot
perfected
team,
to the point of
prepare to
automatism.
disembark.
Set the wheels down gently.
The current of the Nile carried the ships north to the Mediterranean Sea without any effort on the part of the rowers. To sail back south, they used sails that caught the constant north wind.
Predictability allows us to bypass the difficult terrain.
This
and respond
unique
quickly.
natural feature
Agreed.
made navigation on the
move the
river
main force
easy
along
and
the river
predictable in
banks.
both directions. The army could maneuver throughout the country, responding quickly to uprisings or invasions. The Nile was the backbone on which all military logistics were strung. The captains of military ships knew every shoal and every bend in the river, compiling detailed pilot books. They could guide fleets even at night, navigating by the stars and the contours of the banks. The speed of troop deployment by water was many times faster than marching on foot across scorching ground. Soldiers arrived at the battlefield fresh and rested, rather than exhausted from a long journey. This gave them a decisive advantage at the start of any campaign. Thus, the Egyptian army was not just a land force, but the marine landing force of its time. The speed, mobility, and logistics provided by the river made them masters of the situation. In the next chapter, you will learn about those who terrified their enemies with their accuracy. In a world where optical sights had not yet been invented, the Egyptian army possessed living weapons of incredible accuracy. We are talking about Nubian archers, mercenaries from the south, whose skill became legendary. The very name Nubia in the ancient Egyptian language sounded like Taseti, which meant land of the bow. These warriors were born with a bow in their hands and learned to shoot before they could speak. For the pharaohs, they became an indispensable elite, capable of striking the enemy at extreme distances. The Nubians used simple but powerful bows made from a single piece of elastic wood, often palm or acacia. Drawing such a bow required enormous physical strength, but the arrow shot from it could pierce light shields and armor. Unlike complex composite bows, the Nubian bow was reliable and unpretentious in sandy and hot conditions. Arrows with stone or bone tips inflicted terrible lacerations. In battle, Nubian troops acted as skirmishers, starting the battle with a hail of arrows. They operated in a scattered formation, constantly moving and not allowing the enemy to take aim. Their task was to thin out the enemy ranks, kill officers, and sow panic before the main forces clashed. Their mobility and accuracy made them virtually invulnerable to heavy infantry. They stung like wasps and disappeared before they could be struck. The Medjay, an elite Nubian guard that served the pharaohs faithfully, gained particular fame. Initially, they were scouts and border guards, but later they began to perform the functions of police and personal guards for the ruler. The Medjay were renowned for their incorruptibility, endurance, and fanatical loyalty. They were feared not only by enemies on the battlefield, but also by criminals within the country. They were the true special forces of antiquity. The secret of their accuracy lay in constant practice and a special shooting technique. The Nubians shot intuitively, without closing one eye to aim, but looking at the target with both eyes. This allowed them to track moving targets and shoot with incredible speed. They could fire several arrows in the time it took an ordinary archer to draw his bow. The density of fire they created was staggering. The Egyptians held these mercenaries in high esteem and paid them with gold, land, and honors. Nubian archers were often depicted on steles and in tombs alongside Egyptian soldiers as equals. The integration of these warriors into the army was an example of successful military assimilation. the scorching heat, wearing metal armor was tantamount to suicide by heat stroke. Therefore, they developed a unique protection system based on lightweight, imbreathable materials. The basis of Egyptian armor was linen, a fabric that was produced in abundance in the Nile Valley. The multi-layered linen armor was surprisingly durable and effective. Dozens of layers of fabric were glued together to create a stiff but flexible material similar to modern Kevlar. Such armor excelled at absorbing blows and stopping arrows in flight. At the same time, it was lightweight and allowed the skin to breathe, wicking away sweat and preventing overheating. It was the ideal solution for warfare in the African climate. To enhance protection, officers and charioteers sewed bronze scales onto a linen base. These plates overlapped each other like fish scales. Scaled armor was more expensive and heavier, but provided maximum protection for vital organs. At the same time, it preserved the warrior's mobility without restricting his movements in battle. The glint of bronze in the sun also had a psychological effect on the enemy. Shields were the main means of protection for infantrymen and had a characteristic shape with a rounded top. They were made of a wooden frame covered with tanned bull hide. Such a shield was light but incredibly strong and elastic, withstanding blows from axes and spears. The leather cushioned the blow, preventing the shield from splitting, as was the case with solid wooden counterparts. The size of the shield varied depending on the type of troops and the soldier's tasks. Heavy infantry used large shields that covered the body from the chin to the knees. This allowed them to form a dense formation, a wall of shields, invulnerable to arrows. Light infantry and skirmishers preferred smaller shields for greater maneuverability in hand-to-hand combat. The head was protected by helmets, which in earlier times were rare and made of quilted fabric or leather. Later, under the influence of Asian neighbors, bronze helmets appeared, but they remained the prerogative of the elite. The common soldier more often relied on a thick wig or a dense cloth bandage, which softened glancing blows. Head protection was a compromise between safety and the need for cooling. War inevitably led to injuries, and the ability to return a soldier to duty was as important as the ability to arm him. Egyptian military medicine was among the most advanced in the ancient world. Doctors accompanied the army on campaigns, setting up field hospitals in the rear. They had a deep knowledge of anatomy and a wide arsenal of surgical instruments. Wound treatment began with cleaning and disinfection, for which wine and honey were used. Honey was a unique natural antiseptic that prevented the growth of bacteria and accelerated tissue healing. Wounds were sutured using linen thread and needles, and then covered with bandages containing fresh meat, which stopped the bleeding. The Egyptians knew how to set dislocations and apply splints to broken limbs. To fix fractures, they used reeds and bark soaked in resins, which hardened to form a kind of plaster. This allowed the wounded to be transported without the risk of aggravating their injuries. Bone recovery was a long process, but many veterans returned to duty even after severe fracture. Pain relief was provided with opium and other herbal preparations that dulled sensitivity. Doctors knew the dosages that would allow them to perform surgery without killing the patient with pain shock.
This will help with the pain
Caring for the
immediately.
wounded in alleviating their suffering was
Just
part of
try to
medical ethics. Soldiers knew that in case of trouble, they would be helped and not left to die. Special attention was paid to hygiene in order to prevent epidemics in the camp. Doctors monitored the quality of water and instructed soldiers to wash and shave their heads to protect themselves from parasites. Disease prevention was considered as important a task as treating wounds. Cleanliness was the key to the Army's combat readiness. There were even specialized doctors, such as eye doctors, who treated inflammation caused by dust and sand. Sunlight and wind often caused eye diseases that could blind entire units. The use of antimony and various ointments helped preserve the soldier's eyesight. The narrow specialization of doctors indicated a high level of medical development. The Egyptians understood that victory was forged not only on the battlefield, but also in the minds of people. Psychological warfare was an integral part of their strategy aimed at suppressing the will of the enemy. The pharaoh acted not only as commander-in-chief, but as the living embodiment of a god on earth, a giant figure towering over mortals. Propaganda portrayed him as an invincible warrior who single-handedly destroyed entire armies. Before the battle began, large-scale rituals were performed to intimidate the enemy and inspire their own troops. The roar of drums, the sound of trumpets, and the battle cries of thousands of soldiers created an atmosphere of impending doom. The Egyptians carried banners with images of the gods of war, Montu, Sekhmet, and Amun, into battle. The soldiers believed that the heavenly forces themselves were fighting on their side, which made them fearless. The walls of the temples were covered with scenes of brutal reprisals against enemies, where the pharaoh held a bunch of defeated prisoners by their hair. These comics of antiquity were a message to all neighbors. Resistance is futile. The wrath of Egypt is terrible. Ambassadors from foreign powers passing by these reliefs were filled with fear and respect even before negotiations began. The Egyptians skillfully used the reputation of their chariots and archers as a weapon of intimidation. Rumors of clouds of arrows obscuring the sun spread faster than the army itself could move. Often, cities surrendered without a fight, simply upon hearing of the approach of the Egyptian army. Fear was the cheapest and most effective means of conquest. The treatment of prisoners was also part of the psychological game. Sometimes they were executed in public to intimidate the rest, but often they were taken into slavery or settled in separate colonies. The display of captive kings in cages during triumphal processions in Thebes broke the spirit of the conquered peoples.
Hear our words. As we break
Magic played a huge role in preparing for war. Priests created clay enemies, figurines with the names of enemy leaders, which were then smashed and cursed. It was believed that this action weakened the real enemy and deprived him of his will to win. For ancient people, this was not superstition, but a real technology for influencing the world. The military machine of ancient Egypt was an amazing fusion of technology, logistics, and human spirit. They proved that in war, it is not the strongest who wins, but the smartest, most organized, and most resilient. Their ability to adapt to the harsh conditions of the desert, use the river as a road, and turn simple materials into formidable weapons is still impressive even after thousands of years. We saw not frozen statues, but living people who fought, suffered, and won, laying the foundation for one of the greatest civilizations in history. What topics from the history of ancient wars would you like to see in the next videos? Perhaps the tactics of the Roman legions or the secrets of the samurai? Write your suggestions in the comments and be sure to subscribe to the channel to continue this journey through the centuries with us.